My boyfriend of 3 years, Jason Lin, proposed to another woman behind my back. One of his friends asked him, "Jason, what about your little girlfriend?" Jason laughed carelessly. "Let her keep dreaming. In dreams, you can have everything." I turned around silently, put away the engagement ring I had prepared, and went straight to find my academic advisor that very night. I left with the research team, but later I heard Jason had gone mad looking for me. "Hello, your cake order is here." Struggling to carry the 4-tier cake, I stood in front of private room 302 at the GIE club, slightly out of breath, as I knocked on the door. A young man with light brown hair peeked out, and his eyes lit up when he saw the cake in my hands. He quickly took it from me, and excitedly called out into the room, "Jason, the cake's here." Through the clear visor of my helmet, my eyes passed over his shoulder and landed on the center of the room. The lighting was dazzling, and shadows moved about. I saw Jason. He stood tall in the middle of the crowd, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that accentuated his sharp, commanding presence. At that moment, he was looking tenderly at the woman in a white dress standing across from him. Jason took the cake from the young man's hands and carefully placed it on the table. He opened the top layer of the box and took out a delicate jewelry box. Inside, a brilliant diamond ring rested quietly on a bed of black velvet. Jason got down on one knee, raised the ring, and looked deeply into the eyes of the woman in front of him. "Emily, will you marry me?" Emily's eyes shimmered with joyful tears. She nodded with a choked voice, "Yes." Jason gently slid the ring onto her finger, then stood up and pulled her tightly into his arms. The crowd around them erupted into loud cheers and whistles. "Kiss, kiss! You're the man, Jason. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness. May you have children soon." My head buzzed, and everything before my eyes turned blurry. Like a puppet, stripped of its soul, I stood blankly at the doorway, watching a grand proposal that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't until a sudden voice broke through the noise that I snapped out of it. "Jason, what about your little girlfriend? Are you really planning to keep this from her forever? Emily's already about to be our sister-in-law." My heart clenched as if an invisible hand had gripped it tight. Was that little girlfriend me? The room instantly fell silent. Every eye turned toward Jason. He didn't react to the sudden shift in atmosphere. Instead, he held Emily gently and scooped a bit of frosting from the cake, bringing it to her lips. "Try it. Is it sweet?" Emily shyly opened her mouth and ate the cake. She smiled sweetly. "Very sweet." Only then did Jason lazily glance over at everyone, speaking with complete indifference. "It's just a performance. Let her keep dreaming. In dreams, you can have everything." His voice was soft, but every word pierced my ears clearly, like a sharp blade driving straight into my heart. I felt the blood in my veins freeze. "A girl like her," he added with a smirk, "would never be allowed through the doors of the Lin family. These 3 years were nothing but a role-playing game." He chuckled with a touch of mockery in his voice. "I've been bored for a long time." I could no longer hold back my tears. They streamed down uncontrollably. The people around me seemed frozen in place like statues. Only Jason and Emily looked like they existed in another world, clinging to each other in sweet intimacy. I didn't even know how I managed to walk out of the GE club. I only remembered my legs feeling like they were filled with lead, each step like stepping on razor blades. The bitter cold wind lashed against my helmet. I instinctively removed it, only to realize my face was already soaked. I wiped at it roughly with my hand, and the icy touch sobered me up a little. I reached into my pocket and found a small red box lying quietly inside. Inside were 2 plain gold rings. No engravings, no decorations, just smooth bands. The money I used to buy those rings came from 2 months of running deliveries, scraping by and saving every penny. I had gone to a gold shop and carefully picked them out, originally planning to propose to Jason Lin, but now it all just felt like a pathetic joke I played on myself. I took the rings out of the box. Under the street lamp, the golden glow was almost blinding. I stared at them for a long time, over and over. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Gold prices were high these days, after all. I might as well take them back to the store and sell them. I'd heard prices had gone up again recently. Maybe I could even make a little profit. I stood by the roadside for a long time, shivering in the cold wind. Eventually, I took a deep breath and slowly let it out, finally making up my mind. Climbing onto my little electric scooter, I headed straight to my advisor's house. Fortunately, Professor Chen hadn't gone to bed yet. He looked surprised to see me at that hour. "Lena, what are you doing here so late?" I rubbed my hands together anxiously, not quite knowing how to start. "Professor Chen, He seemed to notice my unease and gave me a warm smile. "Come inside, let's talk." He stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was simply furnished but clean and tidy. The bookshelves were crammed with academic texts, and the air carried a faint scent of books and paper. Professor Chen poured me a glass of hot water. "Tell me, what's going on?" Holding the warm cup in my hands, I felt the ice around my heart begin to melt. After a brief hesitation, I finally summoned the courage to speak. "Professor Chen, I've made up my mind. I want to go." He raised an eyebrow slightly, looking a little surprised. "You want to join the research team heading to the Taklamakan?" I nodded firmly. He put down his teacup, his expression turning serious. "Stand up, Lena. You really need to think this through. The Taklamakan Desert is no joke. If you go, you'll be out there at least a year or two, maybe even 3 to 5. You won't be able to come back easily. Once you go, there's no turning back." I knew he was looking out for me. He had always wanted me to continue my studies, pursue a PhD, and become a dedicated researcher one day. But back then, I had been hesitant because of Jason. I didn't want to be too far from him. Now there was no need to worry about that anymore. "Professor Chen, I've thought it through. No matter how many years it takes, I can handle it. You don't need to worry about me." He looked at me quietly for a moment, as if trying to see whether I truly meant it. Then he slowly nodded and smiled with pride. Good. He stood up, walked over to me, and gave my shoulder a firm pat. "This is the kind of courage young people should have, to serve the country and make a real contribution. That's how we honor the support our nation has given us." There was a bright light in Professor Chen's eyes. The light of commitment to ideals, of hope for the future. That light seemed to drive away the shadows in my heart. He sat back down, took a sip of tea, and spoke in a more relaxed tone. "Well, since you've already made your decision, I won't say any more. As it happens, we're scheduled to depart in 1 week. Go back and get yourself ready. If you need anything, come find me anytime." I nodded. "Thank you, Professor Chen." By the time I left his place, it was already late at night. I stood by the road and looked up at the starry sky. The night was full of glittering stars like diamonds scattered across a black curtain. I let out a long breath. When I got back to the apartment, it was empty. Jason still hadn't returned, just as I expected. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the couch. My whole body felt like it was falling apart. The screen of my phone lit up. A pinned message from Jason popped up on WeChat. "Working late tonight, won't be coming home, sleep early, sweetheart." I put the phone down, not even having the strength to reply. Slowly, I got up and looked around. This small apartment we rented had carried 3 years of my youth and my love. The walls were covered with photos of Jason and me. In every single one, we were smiling so sweetly. On the coffee table sat a pair of matching mugs we'd bought while shopping together. His shirt was still hanging out to dry on the balcony. I had just washed it yesterday. Everything was soaked in the warmth of daily life, so cozy, so full of love. But now that warmth felt like a sharp blade, stabbing deep into my chest. This year was supposed to be my final year in grad school, and the 3rd year of my relationship with Jason. We had met back in college. He was the president of the student council, and I was just a freshman. The first time I saw him was at the welcome party. He was on stage wearing a plain white t-shirt, strumming a guitar and singing "You" at the same table. His voice was low and magnetic, and his gaze was soft and deep. In that moment, I felt like my heartbeat skipped a row. He was incredibly popular, always surrounded by admirers, and had gone through several girlfriends. I waited for a time when he was single, then gathered all my courage to confess. He looked at me with a smile and said, "You're pretty bold, huh, little one?" My palms were sweating from nerves. He reached out and ruffled my hair. "Let's give it a shot." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Happiness had come so suddenly, it felt like I was dreaming. We made our relationship official during my first year of grad school. A year into dating, to make things easier, we moved in together and rented this place. In the beginning, we spent all our free time glued to each other, never wanting to be apart. He would get up early to make me breakfast and drive me to class. I'd prepare dinner and wait for him to come home from work. We watched movies together, went shopping together, cooked together, dreamed about the future together. Those sweet memories came flooding back in waves, crashing into me one after another, nearly drowning me. Back then, Jason really did spoil me. I remember once, on a whim, I said I was craving crab soup dumplings from a famous old shop in the south part of the city. That place only made a limited number each day, and the line would wrap around the block several times. I had only mentioned it in passing, but the next morning, steaming hot dumplings appeared on my nightstand. He rubbed his sleepy eyes, grinning proudly. "Well? Your husband's amazing, right?" I was overwhelmed with emotion and couldn't help but ask, "You didn't stand in line all night, did you?" He winked mysteriously. "What's a little line for my queen?" Another time I was in excruciating pain from cramps. He was in the middle of an important meeting at work, but the second he got my call, he rushed home without hesitation. He fumbled around making brown sugar water, used a heating pad to warm my stomach, and clumsily tried to learn massage techniques online. Seeing how flustered he was made my heart ache with sweetness. "Jason, don't be so good to me," I whispered. "It'll make it too hard for me to ever leave you." He pulled me tightly into his arms, his voice deep and tender. "You little fool. How could I not be good to you? I'm gonna spoil you for the rest of my life." Jason never told me his real background. Even back in college, I had a faint feeling his family wasn't ordinary. He drove a car that didn't look flashy, but anyone who knew cars could tell it was high-end and discreet. The restaurants he took me to, the clothes and things he bought, they were all expensive. But I was so naive back then. I just assumed his family was somewhat well off, nothing more. The WeChat notification chimed again, interrupting my thoughts. This time it was a friend request, just 3 simple words, "Emily's son." Without even thinking, I tapped accept. Emily didn't bother with any pleasantries. She immediately sent over a zipped folder. Inside were dozens of intimate photos of her and Jason, on a luxury yacht, in a lavish banquet hall, on exotic foreign streets. The photos covered a span starting from 6 months ago, which meant that at least half a year ago, Jason Lin had already been with Emily's son, while I was still foolishly lost in the fantasy he had created, dreaming about spending the rest of my life with him. Right after that, Emily's voice messages started popping up one after another. "Lena Lin, you didn't seriously think Jason would marry you, did you? Stop dreaming. You don't even know who he really is. The Lin family is one of the top aristocratic families in the capital. Jason is the future heir. He never had the right to choose his own wife. A woman like you with no background isn't even worthy of carrying the Lin family's shoes, let alone joining our circle. If you're smart, get out now. Stop fantasizing. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." Every sentence landed like a slap in the face, stinging with raw humiliation. This was the brutal, bloody truth. I had been living inside a giant lie, a lie spun by Jason and mercilessly shattered by Emily. At some point, it started raining outside. The rain slammed against the windows, making sharp, crackling sounds. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, followed by thunder so loud it shook the air. The sudden noise jolted me out of my spiral of memories. Pain exploded in my head like thousands of needles stabbing into my temples. My vision darkened in waves, and my body wobbled unsteadily. I quickly sat down on the couch, my fingers trembling as I picked up my phone. Acting purely on instinct, I pressed Jason's number. My body still reached for him in moments of weakness. My consciousness began to fade, my limbs growing heavier and heavier. Just before I blacked out, I thought I heard the call connect. I didn't know how long it had been when I finally opened my eyes. Above me was the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room, the faint scent of disinfectant in the air. I was in a hospital. Bit by bit, my memory returned. I remembered everything right before I passed out. I had called Jason. Was he the one who brought me here? I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it had no strength at all. That's when I noticed someone slumped over at the edge of the bed. It was Jason. His eyes were shut tight, his brows furrowed like he was having a restless sleep. His hair was a mess, and his chin was covered in scruffy stubble. He looked exhausted. The moment I shifted slightly, the mattress creaked and Jason snapped awake. He sprang up from the chair. "Lena, you're awake." His voice was filled with a mix of joy and nervousness. He leaned in quickly, scanning me from head to toe. "How do you feel? Is anything hurting? Does your head still ache? Should I call the doctor?" His questions came rapid fire, one after another, like bullets. His eyes were filled with concern and anxiety. The flu had hit me hard and fast. I'd been on an IV for 3 straight days before I started feeling even slightly better. During those 3 days, Jason took time off work and stayed by my side the entire time. He gave me my medicine, brought me water, and even helped me to the bathroom. He didn't leave me for a second. He was attentive to every little detail, caring in every possible way. If I hadn't seen those photos with my own eyes, hadn't heard Emily's words with my own ears, I might have really believed that he loved me. By the 3rd afternoon, my fever had finally gone down, and I felt much more like myself. Then Jason's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, frowning slightly, then stood and walked out of the room to take the call. I lay in bed, aimlessly scrolling through my phone. The hospital room door wasn't completely closed, and through the gap, I could faintly hear Jason Lynn's voice. "Yeah," he said. "I'm at the hospital. Something came up." A moment later, another voice filtered in, a slightly hoarse male voice, probably one of Jason's buddies. "Yo, Jason, what's so important that you bailed on the guys tonight?" Jason's voice was lower now. "Lena's sick. I'm here taking care of her." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then came a burst of loud laughter. "No way. You serious, Jason? You're actually falling for that girl?" I held my breath, waiting for Jason's answer. Time stretched painfully long, like an entire century passed in that silence. Finally, Jason let out a short laugh. As if, and just like that, whatever hope I was still holding on to crumbled. All the concern in his eyes, the worry in his voice, it was all just an act. I closed my eyes and forced back the tears threatening to fall. When Jason returned to the room, I was lying in bed pretending to casually browse my phone. "Lena, feeling better?" he asked softly as he walked over and gently touched my forehead. I pushed down the bitterness swelling in my chest and forced a smile that looked more painful than crying. "Yeah, much better." "Jason," I said, doing my best to keep my voice calm, "you should head back to work. I'm fine now. You don't have to stay here anymore." He frowned. "No, you're not fully recovered yet. I'm not leaving." "There's really no need," I insisted, shaking my head. "Look at you, your beard's grown out, and you look exhausted. Go home and get some rest." Jason looked at me deeply, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just nodded. "All right, I'll go for now. Get some rest. Call me if you need anything." He hadn't been gone long when my phone buzzed. It was a message on WeChat. I picked it up and saw yet another photo from Emily's son. In the photo, Jason had changed out of the wrinkled shirt and pants he'd been wearing earlier. Now he was dressed in a crisp, custom-tailored suit, standing inside an upscale bridal boutique. One hand held a pure white wedding dress, the other was tightly clasping Emily's hand. She was wearing a wedding gown too, beaming with happiness as she leaned sweetly against him. Then another voice message came through. "Miss Lynn, this is a warning. Don't contact my fiancé again. We're getting married very soon." I stared at their interlocked hands in the photo, and my stomach churned violently. I quickly arranged for my discharge. When I returned to the apartment, Jason still wasn't home. I called him. He picked up almost immediately. "Lena, what's wrong?" His voice was laced with urgency. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Nothing. Just wondering why you didn't come home to rest." There was a brief silence on the line. Then Jason's voice came back, sounding flustered. I had something to do. He must have realized I wasn't at the hospital anymore." "Lena, you went home. Why didn't you stay and rest?" "The doctor said I was cleared to leave," I said calmly. Jason went quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Lena. There's something urgent at the office today. I might not be able to have dinner with you tonight." I curled my lips into a bitter smile. "That's fine," I replied politely. "I need to go to campus anyway. I won't be home either." On the other end, I could hear Jason exhale with relief. "Okay, just be careful on your way." "Text me when you get to campus," Jason said. I hung up the phone and tossed it aside. Reaching up to touch my chest, I noticed it didn't hurt the way it had the night before. when the pain had gripped me so tightly I could barely breathe. Now it just felt hollow, like something had quietly disappeared along with my tears. I slowly climbed out of bed and walked to the wardrobe. When I opened the doors, Jason's shirts and my dresses hung side by side, crisscrossed and intertwined. Once, it had looked so harmonious, full of everyday life and warmth. Now, it just felt harsh and out of place. I quickly pulled out a few of my clothes and shoved them into a suitcase. Then I went to the bathroom and grabbed my toothbrush, towel, and face wash, just the essentials. Everything else I left behind. After zipping up the suitcase, I took one last look around the place I had once called home. At school, I went straight to Professor Chen's office. "Professor Chen, I'm here to finalize the paperwork." Once everything was processed, he told me I didn't need to stay on campus for the next few days. "Take care of what you need to. We leave Sunday morning at 8:30. I nodded, then stepped outside and made 2 phone calls, one to each of my parents. They had divorced when I was in middle school. Not long after, they both remarried and had new families. I became the unwanted burden between them. It was my grandmother who took me in. She was a wise woman who always told me, a girl must be strong and love herself. Only when you love yourself can you love others. Only then can you live with dignity without depending on anyone. That's why, even though I had dated Jason, even lived with him, I never gave up on my studies. I knew it was my only way forward. My grandmother passed away that year. She left peacefully without much pain. I cried my heart out, but I knew I had to be strong. I had no one else to lean on anymore. Luckily, I'd already learned how to live on my own. I visited both my parents' new homes once, just once, and I never went back. Those places weren't my homes. I didn't belong. That feeling of being an outsider, of intruding where I didn't fit, was suffocating. I called them both to let them know I'd be leaving. Their responses were exactly what I expected: distant, indifferent, polite. Over the years, we had all gotten used to a life without one another. Finishing those 2 calls felt like closing a chapter. From this point on, I was truly no longer connected to them. I spent the next few days on campus. Jason called to ask what I was up to. "I've just been busy with graduation stuff," I told him. "You don't need to worry about me." If he sensed anything strange, he didn't show it. He just reminded me to take care of myself, not to overwork, and told me he'd be traveling for a few days on a business trip. After I put down the phone, I stared blankly out the window. My mind was foggy, lost. Over those days, I moved through tasks like a robot, numb, mechanical, methodical. I kept myself busy to avoid thinking about anything else. Meanwhile, Jason was helping Emily's son plan their wedding. The day I left just happened to be Emily's birthday. She gushed sweetly online that Jason was planning a romantic celebration for her. I told myself not to cry. There was nothing worth crying over. The day before I left, I returned to the apartment one last time. When I opened the door, everything was exactly the same familiar scent, the same familiar layout. Jason hadn't been back these past few days. That was a good thing. I began packing. I pulled out everything, mine and not mine, and sorted through it. I gathered all the things I no longer needed. One by one, I tossed the things I didn't need into the trash. Then I walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer of the nightstand. Inside lay a photo album, quiet, undisturbed. It was filled with pictures from our 3 years together. I flipped through them slowly. In each photo, we were smiling so brightly, so sweetly. I had once believed those photos would capture a lifetime of happiness. I picked up a pair of scissors and began cutting myself out of each picture. Piece by piece, I erased myself. When I finished, I picked up a pen and wrote a short letter. "Jason Lin, let's break up. I wish you and Miss Sun happiness." I placed the letter on the coffee table in the living room, weighed down beneath the ashtray. Then I left my phone beside it. Taking one last look at the place that had once echoed with our laughter, I quietly closed the door behind me. Outside, I pulled out a second phone and contacted Mrs. Wong, the landlord. "Hi, I'm the tenant from Unit 302. I'm moving out." The next day, I left the capital with the scientific research team. No goodbyes, no second thoughts. I only gave my new number to my roommate, Lily Lin. She was loud and impulsive, but also the warmest and most loyal friend I had during my 3 years of grad school. She didn't ask questions, just pulled me into a tight hug before I left. "Lena, listen to me," she said. "No matter where you are, take care of yourself. And if anyone ever makes you feel small, come back. Your girls will always have your back. At last, I couldn't hold back my tears. Thank you, Lily. The research base we moved to was under strict closed management. We barely used phones there. All our time was consumed by the project. Endless experiments, data analysis, report writing. I buried myself in books, in the lab, in work. And there I joined the military. Yes, I became a soldier. The moment I put on the uniform, it felt like I had become someone entirely new. I was no longer that girl, lost in love and fragile from heartbreak. I was a warrior, a scientific warrior. I cut my long hair, trading it for a neat, cropped style. I was no longer afraid, no longer confused. Because now I had a goal, a direction. 5 years later, our research made a breakthrough. I returned to school to receive my doctorate. 5 years, over 1,800 days and nights, and I had finally done it. Standing on campus, I watched the flow of students, fresh faces, full of energy, sunlight glowing on their skin. I felt like I was looking at my younger self from 5 years ago. That evening, I had dinner with Lily. After graduating, she had stayed in the capital and worked at a research institute. She'd built a life here, even had a 3-year-old daughter now. I had reserved a quiet, private restaurant. After all these years, we needed a proper reunion. Lily arrived right on time and brought along her soft, chubby little girl. The child had delicate features like a porcelain doll, and her big eyes sparkled like stars. I instantly adored her. As soon as we met, I handed the little girl a thick red envelope and then took out the trendy Barbie doll I had prepared in advance. She beamed and said in a crisp, clear voice, "Thank you, Auntie." My heart completely melted. Lily gave me a playful look. "You're going to spoil her rotten." I laughed and gently pinched the little one's cheek. "She's just a kid. You're supposed to spoil them." Lily and I chatted as we ate, reminiscing about our student days and marveling at how fast time had flown. She looked me over carefully, eyes full of amazement. "Lena, you've changed so much. Even though you're wearing civilian clothes now," she motioned up and down with her hand. "You can't hide it. That soldier's aura, it's strong. You stand like a poplar tree. Tall and proud." I smiled faintly but didn't tell her that, in a quiet corner of the restaurant, 2 plainclothes security personnel were stationed, silently ensuring my safety. It was standard protocol. For someone at my level in scientific research, any public outing required security measures. Lily marveled at how much I had changed, then, as always, shifted straight into gossip about my love life. "Lena, are you seeing anyone now? Don't tell me you're still single. It's been 5 years. Don't tell me you're still hung up on Jason Lin." I picked up a piece of fish, placed it in my mouth, and chewed slowly. "How could I be?" I said calmly, setting down my chopsticks. "I got married a while ago." Lily's jaw dropped into a perfect O. "What, you got married? And you didn't tell me? Do I even count as your sister anymore?" She looked like she was about to flip the table. I quickly tried to calm her down. "It was a special situation. The wedding was really simple, and we didn't notify anyone. I promise we'll make it up to you one day." Only then did Lily start to settle down, though she couldn't help asking, "Come on, spill it. What does he do? Is he handsome? Is he good to you?" I nodded with a smile. "He's amazing, smart, kind, and incredibly capable. We met during a joint military exercise." Just as I was about to tell her more about how we met and our story, the restaurant door suddenly swung open. A wave of voices and noise came in. Instinctively, I looked up and froze. There, standing at the entrance, was someone I thought I'd never see again in my life, Jason Lin. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, standing tall and composed, still exuding that same effortless elegance. But now there was something different about him. His features carried more maturity, a certain weariness in his eyes. He seemed to notice me, too. His steps slowed. For a brief moment, his face shifted, emotions flickering across it in rapid succession. Our eyes met across the room. "Lena." Lily followed my gaze and caught sight of Jason. She nudged my arm sharply, her voice low and full of disbelief. "Isn't that Jason Lin?" Even during my time at the research base, which was mostly closed off from the outside world, I would occasionally talk to Lily. Every time we spoke, she'd excitedly update me with tidbits of gossip, especially anything involving Jason. After all, she had been there for everything that happened between us. She knew how deeply I had loved him. She also knew how badly I had been hurt. And now, just like that, the man who'd once shattered me was standing right in front of me. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. It had been 5 years. He had changed, and yet somehow, he hadn't. What had changed was his demeanor, the maturity in his gaze, the way his once bold energy had settled into a quieter strength. What hadn't changed was his face, his silhouette, and the familiarity that made him instantly recognizable, even from across a crowd. Lily noticed I hadn't reacted and nudged me again. "Lena, are you okay?" I blinked, coming back to myself. I shook my head gently. "I'm fine. What could happen to me? It's just an old acquaintance." But the truth was, this reunion had caught me completely off guard. I had believed everything between us had long since turned to dust, that we'd gone our separate ways for good. Yet here we were again, thrust back into each other's orbit by the strange, invisible gears of fate. Lily seemed to read my mind. She let out a soft sigh. "Jason came back to the apartment the day after you left. The landlord had called him, asking whether he still needed the things inside. You'd moved out, after all, and the place had to be rented again. At the time, he was still with Emily's son. They were picking out their final wedding gown. But after the call, he rushed back immediately. On the way, he called you over and over again. But every time, he got the same message. Phone powered off. He panicked, completely lost it. He never imagined you'd actually leave him. He burst into the apartment like a madman, only to find it completely empty. You'd taken everything that belonged to you. And then, he saw the breakup letter. And then there were the messages on the phone, those photos Emily's son had sent me. That's when Jason Lynn realized I had known about their relationship all along. That's why I had left so decisively. I had left all our memories behind in that apartment. Jason had been completely stunned. He read the breakup letter over and over, his eyes red with disbelief, yet still refusing to accept that I could really walk away from him. Then he went into a frenzy, searching for me everywhere, every place I might have gone, contacting everyone I'd ever known, but no one had any idea where I was. It was as if I had vanished from the face of the earth, completely erased from his world. As for what happened after that, Lily didn't know much. She only knew that Jason and Emily had been going through a divorce lately, and that for all these years, he had never stopped looking for me. He would visit Lily often, hoping she might slip up and reveal something. But Lily knew my work was classified, and she never said a word. Jason stood there now, his tall frame nearly blocking out the warm amber lighting of the restaurant, casting a long shadow on the floor. His eyes were slightly red, his voice low and hoarse with the faintest tremble in it. "It's been a long time, Lena." I'll admit, when I first saw him, my heart skipped a beat. But the feeling passed quickly. I had changed. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who would throw everything away for love. I stood up, nodded slightly, and replied with polite detachment. "Yes, it's been a long time." Lily glanced between the two of us, then quickly picked up her daughter and stood. "We'll let you talk. My husband's coming to pick us up." She gave me a meaningful look before leaving with her child in her arms. Jason and I were left in silence. Eventually, he was the one who spoke first. "Let's sit down somewhere and talk." I didn't refuse. Some things needed to be said. We walked into a quiet cafe next to the restaurant and found a window seat. A waiter came to take our order. Jason turned to me, his expression cautious, almost hopeful. "Black coffee?" he asked. He still remembered what I used to like. I shook my head. "No, just plain water, please." Jason looked at me, a flicker of disappointment and confusion in his eyes. "You don't drink coffee anymore?" I gave a faint smile. "I quit. Life in the military is strict and regimented. Coffee was one of the first things to go." His eyes dimmed. He seemed to realize something, but didn't say it aloud. His lips parted, then closed again. I looked at him, my heart surprisingly calm. Time truly was a strange thing. It could dull pain and change people. The Jason I remembered had been bold and arrogant, full of fire. But now, he was restrained, cautious, even a little uncertain. And I was no longer the girl whose whole world revolved around him. Turning my gaze to the window, I watched the busy street outside, headlights passing like waves of time. I spoke softly. "Jason, I'm married." He stiffened instantly, his head snapping up as he stared at me in disbelief. "What did you say?" he rasped, his voice cracked with pain. "I said I'm married. I repeated, steady and composed. My husband is in the military, too. Jason's face turned pale in an instant. He stared at me, eyes filled with pain, frustration, and a sense of helpless devastation. His mouth opened as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, no words came out. I looked at him, feeling nothing. No waves in my chest, no anger in my heart. I used to think I would hate him, but now I realized I didn't. I didn't hate him at all. I just knew that whatever was between us had ended. Long ago. It had ended the day I left the capital 5 years ago. Now, we were nothing more than familiar strangers. The faint aroma of coffee drifted through the cafe. Outside the window, neon lights flickered. Everything felt calm, peaceful, beautiful. I picked up the glass of warm water in front of me, took a slow sip, feeling the warmth travel down my throat and settle quietly in my chest. My heart was at ease. Lena, you're joking, right? Jason's voice was raspy, trembling with one last thread of desperate hope. You're lying to me, aren't you? I looked at him and slowly shook my head. Jason, I'm not joking. I would never joke about my marriage. He froze, completely still, like time had stopped around him. I stared into the water in my glass. The surface was still and clear, reflecting a calm, emotionless face. I lifted the cup and finished the last of it, then stood up and looked at him, speaking with polite distance. Jason, what we had ended a long time ago. It ended the moment you chose Emily's son. I don't think we need to see each other again. As I stepped out of the cafe, Jason came chasing after me. He grabbed my arm tightly, so tight it felt like he might crush the bone. Lena? His voice cracked, tinged with a desperate kind of pleading. It's too late. Let me at least take you home. I stopped walking, but didn't look back. With a sharp twist, I broke free from his grip. Jason, it's over. You know me. Once I've made a decision, I never go back. I pointed to 2 plainclothes men standing a short distance away. He followed my gesture. Under the dim streetlights, 2 tall men in black suits stood silently at attention. Jason's face turned even paler. He took a few steps back. I turned to face him one last time and said quietly, Someone's already taking me home. You don't have to worry. Sitting in the car, I gently rested a hand on my belly. Inside, a tiny life was growing. 2 months along now, this was my child. When I got back, I would tell my husband the good news. We were going to have a baby. The thought brought a smile to my lips, a genuine, soft curve of joy. My life was finally complete. Jason's perspective. Epilogue. Jason Lynn had never imagined their breakup would happen so abruptly. They hadn't even had a real conversation about it. No final words, no confrontation, just silence. And then she was gone. For 5 whole years, Lena Lynn had disappeared from his world as if she'd never existed. He had tried everything, pulled every string, searched every possible lead, but it was like running into an invisible wall. No one would tell him anything. Eventually, he understood. Lena had likely gone somewhere classified, somewhere even his wealth and connections couldn't reach. That realization made him laugh bitterly. She had really gone to every length to disappear from his life. And then, 5 years later, in a place where he least expected it, they ran into each other again, without warning. And she was already someone else's wife. From the overwhelming joy of seeing her again, to the piercing pain of her words, it had taken him only minutes to crash from elation to devastation. But there was nothing left to say. He could see it clearly now. Lena had truly moved on. The moment she walked away 5 years ago, she had stopped being his. Jason stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the woman he had once loved climb into that black car and vanish into the night. He slumped onto the hotel steps, covering his face with both hands, curling in on himself in pain. Lena. He repeated her name again and again in his heart. Over and over. That name, Lena, the one he had called with affection for 3 years. Jason Lynn remembered the first time he saw her. She was wearing a pair of faded jeans and a plain white t-shirt, standing quietly among a crowd of freshmen. Pure and beautiful. Her long, dark hair shimmered and fell loosely over her shoulders. Her eyes were big and bright, but there was also a trace of nervous timidity in them, like a startled fawn, cautious yet curious. He had been on stage, strumming a guitar and singing, when he caught her secretly staring at him. Her gaze was full of admiration, and maybe even a hint of infatuation. From that moment on, he remembered her. Girls came and went in his life like scenes on a carousel. But he knew there was always one girl silently watching him, quietly liking him. Until one day, after breaking up with a girlfriend he'd only dated for 2 months, he deliberately waited a few days. And just as he'd expected, Lena finally confessed. She stood beneath his dorm building, holding a pink envelope in both hands, her head lowered, not daring to look at him. Her face was flushed red, and even the tips of her ears were about to drip blood. Her voice was soft and trembling. "Jason, I've liked you for a long time." He had looked at her, and in that moment found her absolutely adorable, this shy girl summoning all her courage. He smiled and took the letter from her hand. "Then let's give it a try." Jason had always felt that he and Lena shared some kind of fated connection. Their names both had the character Jin in them, though not exactly the same character. It still felt like destiny to him. He stubbornly believed that. After dating for a year, they rented a small apartment near campus. Of course, Jason had his own places, more than one actually. But he didn't want Lena to know about his family background. He wanted their relationship to be simple, untainted by material things. He wanted her to love him, not his money, not his last name. Their time living together was sweet and warm. He loved watching her move around the kitchen, loved the soft scent of laundry detergent on her clothes, loved curling up with her on the couch to watch old movies. But they weren't glued to each other all the time. Most of their days were still spent on campus. She was incredibly disciplined, always putting her studies first. When they started dating, she was already a first-year master's student. Her talent in physics was remarkable. Her advisor valued her highly and often brought her along for projects. Sometimes she would spend days at a time locked in the lab, forgetting to eat, barely sleeping. Jason ached for her, but he couldn't stop her. So he found other ways to care for her, bringing homemade meals to the lab, sneaking in little comforts. "Lena, can't you slow down a little? Your health matters too," he'd plead more than once. She would just smile, kiss the corner of his mouth and say, "I know, but I'm still young. Once I get my PhD, I'll take a real break." Over time, Jason couldn't help feeling a little bitter. He wanted to be the most important thing in her life. But with Lena, he always came second. Her studies, her research, they were always her top priority. Sometimes he'd wonder, if she weren't so talented, would she spend more time with me? But he'd shake the thought away as soon as it came. What he loved most about her was her focus, her determination. He loved the way she chased her dreams like nothing else mattered. One night, Lena suddenly asked him, "Jason, do you feel like I don't spend enough time with you?" He was caught off guard and quickly shook his head. "No, of course not. How could I ever feel that way? I just worry about your health, that's all." She smiled quietly and didn't say anything more. She just hugged him tightly and buried her face in his chest. At that moment, Jason felt like the luckiest man in the world. But after 2.5 years together, he was called back to take over the family business. His grandfather's health was rapidly declining. He had no choice but to shoulder his responsibilities. His grandfather had arranged a marriage for him with the daughter of the Sun family. Jason had known Emily's son since they were kids. He knew she had always liked him. Ever since they were little, she followed him around like a tiny shadow, her world revolving only around him. "Jason," she once asked with those wide, innocent eyes, "when will you marry me?" He only smiled and patted her head. "When you grow up, we'll talk." He had always seen her as a little sister, never once imagining that one day he'd actually marry her. But now, for the sake of his family, he had no choice but to make that decision. Sometimes, Jason wondered if he weren't the heir to the Lin family, if his background had been just a little more ordinary, would things between him and Lena have been easier? If he didn't have to carry the weight of family expectations, if he didn't have to worry about social status and business alliances, if he didn't have to sacrifice love for so-called duty, maybe Lena wouldn't have had to push herself so hard. Maybe he wouldn't have neglected her just to prove his worth. But life doesn't deal in what-ifs. After a few arranged meetings, Emily began calling herself his fiancée. She clung to him with complete devotion, always putting him first. She dressed up carefully just to look her best for him. She learned to cook so she could prepare his favorite meals. She gave up her own hobbies just to spend more time by his side. That feeling of being cherished, of being someone's everything, something Jason had never experienced with Lena, became overwhelming with Emily. He admitted it. He wavered. Slowly, the scales in his heart tipped toward her. He began to think that marrying a woman who only had eyes for him might not be so bad. At least he wouldn't have to live with uncertainty, always wondering whether she might leave. As for Lena, his love for her was never in question. But her identity, her personality, they made her fundamentally incompatible with the role of Mrs. Lin. She was too independent, too strong-willed, too dazzling. And the kind of wife the Lin family expected was someone who could lean on Jason, manage his home, support him without needing to outshine him. So at a party one evening, when a friend asked him about Lena, Jason gave a straightforward answer. "We've broken up." "You never thought to tell her that yourself?" Jason hadn't expected that the last time he'd see Lena would be the day she was discharged from the hospital. After that day, he became consumed with other things, helping Emily pick out wedding dresses, planning her birthday party. He used all those preparations to distract himself, to numb the ache. After all, he had made his choice. But he underestimated Lena's decisiveness and overestimated his own importance. On Emily's birthday, Jason got a call from the landlord. "Jason, are you still renting the place? If not, I'm going to list it again." He paused, confused. "What do you mean? Didn't your girlfriend move out already? She packed all her stuff and returned the keys. Are you two breaking up?" The landlord sounded unsure, but in Jason's mind, everything came to a screeching halt. He couldn't think, he couldn't breathe. He jumped in his car and sped toward the apartment they once shared. He didn't even know how many red lights he blew through. He just drove. When he pushed open the door, his heart dropped into a void. The apartment was empty. The warmth that once filled their little home was gone, replaced by a cold emptiness. She had taken everything that belonged to her. Clean, decisive, not a single trace left behind. Just like her, once she made up her mind, there was no turning back. On the table, he found what she had left, a breakup letter, and a phone filled with photos of him and Emily, photos that Lena must have already seen. She didn't even leave him a chance to explain. No anger, no confrontation, just calm, final words. And in that moment, Jason understood everything. Lena had known, she had seen it all. She had only been waiting for him to come clean, and he chose to lie. To hide. He had pushed her away with his own hands, and now he had lost her the same way. It was in that moment that Jason finally realized just how terribly wrong he had been. His chest felt hollow, like a part of him had been carved out, the pain so sharp it stole his breath away. Only then did he truly understand. He couldn't live without Lena. Jason went straight home and told Emily he wanted to break up, but she clung to him, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Jason didn't want to hear another word from her. It was her, she, who had driven Lena away. Emily ran to Jason's grandfather in tears and told him she was pregnant with a Lin family child. Mr. Lin immediately had people drag Jason back home. He didn't resist. After all, it was true, he had slept with Emily. Bound by obligation and pressure, Jason was forced to marry her. The moment their marriage certificate was issued, his heart completely sank into despair. But there was nothing he could do. Without Lena, his days felt meaningless. He was like an empty shell, walking through life without purpose. Day after day passed, and Emily's true colors began to show. It turned out she had never been pregnant. Everything she had said was a lie. Later, Jason found out that while she was studying abroad, she had lived recklessly. After multiple abortions, she could no longer conceive. Ever. When he heard the news, Jason didn't feel angry or even surprised. He just found it all absurd. He had given up Lena for this? He must have been blind. Jason threw himself into work, relentlessly. Overtime, meetings, endless social engagements. He turned himself into a machine, because only that way could he forget Lena, or at least numb the pain of losing her. But deep down, Jason was plotting his return. He was determined to reclaim everything that was supposed to be his. And after 5 long years, he finally took full control of the Lin Corporation. Bit by bit, he dismantled the Sun family's influence, swallowing their assets and leaving nothing behind. He threw the divorce papers in Emily's face. Sign it. Get out of the Lin house. He wanted her gone, completely erased from his world. Years later, Jason saw Lena again. She was in uniform, holding hands with a little girl around 4 or 5 years old. Beside her stood a tall, dignified officer. His Lena. She was still stunning. Time had left no trace on her face, only added a gentle elegance to her beauty. It was clear she was happy, glowing even. Jason clutched his stomach, wincing at the dull pain that had been bothering him for weeks. He stood frozen, watching Lena and her family walk farther and farther away. He had just been diagnosed with stomach cancer. He didn't know how much time he had left or if he'd ever get to see her again. He closed his eyes, trying to suppress the wave of sorrow and regret rising in his chest. If only time could go back. But life offers no such mercy.